Tales from the Mind, radio loop. Images of blood and death filled his dreams when he awoke from another fitful night of semi-sleep. He hadn't slept much since the end, as his body was in a constant state of tension. No matter how well he barricaded the doors, he knew that they would get in eventually. That one day he would slip up, that he would forget something. Rubbing weariness from his eyes, he stood. Quickly, he rolled up his sleeping bag and he tied it once more to his pack. He stretched out, trying to release the tension from his back from sleeping on a cold, hard floor for another night. The survivor reached for his shotgun, and he made sure that it was loaded. It was time to go. He couldn't waste any of the night. Stopping for a moment, he stares at the door and takes in 3 sharp breaths as he prepares himself for another night. He had no choice. Night was the safest time to travel. Reaching for the doorknob of the supply closet, he gently opened it up, raising the shotgun with one hand, pushing it in front of him as he steps out. He had camped the night in the back room of a roadside burger joint. It seemed relatively unruined, and it had a sturdy lock on the supply room door. He had locked the front doors and slid a table in front of them to further secure himself, but he could never be sure when it came to the feral. They had an uncanny ability to get into places, especially places that they once frequented, places that held some memory in their animalistic minds. He moved through the back room quickly and quietly, the shotgun held with 2 hands now as he cleared the workstations, moving out into the main dining room. But the former restaurant was quiet. There was no one curled under the tables or on the benches. He breathed a sigh of relief and lowered his weapon, his muscles relaxing as he slumped forward. There had been several nights that he had awoken to find his safe haven overrun with ferals, and he had no choice but to lock himself back inside and hope that they moved on in the morning. He had lost several days that way. Looking back through the plate glass windows, he made sure the parking lot also looked clear before pushing aside the table that he had blocked the door with. Unlocking the door, he stepped outside. The shotgun came up again, and he swung it across his field of vision. But nothing shifted in the darkness. The old Bronco that he had called home for the better part of a month was untouched. He moved quickly, having long since gotten over the pure silence of the world now. At first, it was haunting, where even at night the world had its own noises, but now there was nothing but silence. At first, the silence was haunting, where even at night the world had its own noises, but now there was nothing but silence, stillness. The parking lot was illuminated by the street lamps that came on automatically, and not for the first time. He wondered how much longer those generators would last before the world was plunged into a new dark age. He locked the doors to the Bronco, and he started the engine, pulling away from the parking lot quickly, not wanting to wait around to discover if any feral had chosen the nest nearby, or if they were awakened by the noise. They liked to sleep at night, but that didn't mean that they wouldn't attack. He was on the main road once more before he turned on the radio and breathed a sigh of relief as he heard the signal coming in strong. The station was halfway through Bob Seger's Night Moves, an apt title that made him smile in spite of himself and the world that he currently found himself in. As he cruised ever westward, the song ended and the now familiar voice cut in once again. Hey, hey, party people! You are once again tuning into the Soul Survivor Radio, and we appreciate having you. Never mind the fact that there isn't a whole lot else to listen to these days. These emergency broadcast signals are just plain annoying, and they don't have that classic sound that truly gets you through the apocalypse, you know? The Soul Survivor said. But hey, none of that is important now. News out of the safe zones has already stopped, so I can't imagine that they're all that safe anymore. For those who are still living and grooving, we're here for you, and we'll stay on the air as long as we can. The building's pretty secure, and we've got enough food to last us for a while. For a brief moment, the survivor frowns and glances at the radio. Its orange glow illuminating the front seat of the Bronco, and he can't remember if he's heard those exact words before, or if the DJ just likes talking about the secure building. But he shakes his head and drums his hands on the steering wheel. The world would make anyone repeat themselves. Crazy is baked right into it. He continued on through the night as the radio kept him company, gifting him with music by Queen, Foreigner, AC/DC, and Bad Company. The DJ even threw in some Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. He wasn't usually a country fan, but something about the melancholy music fit his situation. There were times that the survivor had to slow as he squeezed the Bronco around the crashed cars, but the DJ was his constant companion, reminding listeners that the feral liked to move in packs and could swarm quickly, that they would find themselves a cozy place to stay for the night. But not all of them. You have to remember that. Most go to sleep where it's safe when the sun goes down, but just like us, there's a few night owls out there, those that find the light of the moon to be invigorating. So be careful if you have to travel. Also protect yourself out there, the DJ tells him, because the survivor felt like he was talking directly to him. Remember, there's nothing supernatural about them. You don't have to shoot them in the head like some zombie movie. They'll go down just as easy as any human. Hell, if we wait long enough, maybe the flu will take them all out, or they'll just starve to death. For a moment, you can hear the sadness in his voice. There's a long pause and then a sigh. That's a happy thought, isn't it? Anyway, here's some Rocksteady by Bad Company. He says, and the survivor begins to bob his head to the guitar beat and drums as he slows down for a moment so he can steer around another wreck. The world around him was in shambles. It was easier when he was driving through more rural areas, but now he found himself driving through a small town that was bisected by a 2-lane highway. Streetlights illuminated an empty world. Cars parked haphazardly. Some crashed into buildings and through large front windows. He slowed briefly as he came to a light, which was still working. He looked to the left and then to the right, not surprised to see no other headlights. But he paused, thinking that he had seen a flash of something moving amongst the cars on either side of the road. The survivor didn't wait. He hit the gas and he began to speed away, not wishing to let any night owls swarm him, though he didn't think they moved in as large of a pack as the normal ferals. It was several minutes before he took his foot off the gas, not wishing to wreck the Bronco on the crash-packed roads, knowing that he'd have to waste time finding a new ride and moving his gear, not to mention the chance of him being hurt in the process. So he continues on, the Bronco leaving the small town and finding itself once more on quiet country roads. The survivor could almost imagine that it was just a regular late night into the early morning when he found himself on these roads. Long train run-in by the Doobie Brothers had ended, and the DJ came back onto the airwaves, joining the survivor on the road as he had for the past several nights. All right, folks, I'd love to take some calls from all of you survivors out there, but since the cell towers don't seem to be working anymore, and I'm not sure anyone even owns a landline, you listeners will just have to suffer through my long monologues. The survivor can't help but smile along with his laughter. He's heard the monologue before, about how the DJ had managed to barricade himself in the radio station when the outbreak started, how he had decided to stay on the air as long as possible, giving those out there hope and tips on how to deal with and avoid the feral. The DJ liked to repeat himself, like he did with the songs. It could get a bit repetitive, but that was the way of radio even before the fall. As the night wore on, the survivor glanced at his gauges and he frowned. He would need gas soon, which probably meant finding a place to hold up for the night. He had hoped to reach the radio station before morning, but it didn't look like that was going to happen. Another hour passed before he found a place to stop. The lights were on at the station, which meant that they had power and they were automated. Def Leppard was playing at that time as he pulled up to the pump, and with a sad sigh, he turned the key and shut the Bronco down. The pumps themselves looked like they were on, but he knew from experience that he would have to go back inside and activate them from the register. Looking around, he made sure the night seemed quiet. There were a few scattered cars around the parking lot and a diner across the street. The lights inside the diner were off, but a neon sign over one window declared that it was open 24 hours. He gave it a few seconds before hefting the shotgun and turning back towards the gas station. The door was left ajar. There was a few scattered pieces of garbage stopping it from closing. Stepping inside, he swept the shotgun around all of the ruined aisles. The metal shelves had been pushed over and shoved to the side. One leaned haphazardly against another, its contents strewn along the dirty tile floor. The drink refrigerators in the back were all shattered, with the area being darkened by the sticky liquid that had dried. The survivor pauses for a moment, listening for the sound of the feral hiding amongst the debris, sleeping in relative safety through the night. But there was nothing, just his own boots crunching along the chips and garbage across the floor. He moves quickly behind the counter, figuring out the buttons on the register to activate the pumps outside. As he turns back to leave, he notices the front door. If it's secure enough, he might be able to use this place as a hideout for the night. Moving forward, he tries the doorknob. It turns with a squeak in his hand, and he pushes gently, but the heavy wooden door doesn't budge. A frown crosses his lips, and he tries again, pushing harder this time. He puts his shoulder into the third try, but the door still doesn't move more than a few centimeters. Maybe someone hid inside and died, the survivor says to himself, his voice sounding louder than it should in the empty world. He backs away from the door for a moment, raising his shotgun to be safe. Images of feral coming rushing at him racing through his mind, but the door doesn't shift, and he finally turns away. After he leaves, the gas station returns to its previous stillness, but a deep-throated growl sounds from behind the door, and the knob begins to turn. Outside, the survivor finishes filling up his tank, putting the pump back and preparing to get inside, but a deep growl sounds from inside of his stomach. He sighs, knowing that he should try to salvage something to eat from the abandoned station. Sliding back into the car, he turns away from the Bronco, heading back towards the door. But he jumps to the start as he looks up to see a massive feral staring at him from within. The monster wore the same thing it wore in death, blue jeans and a red worker's shirt, but the clothing was tattered from the end of the world. The creature had already begun to lose its hair. The few tattered strands that remained were matted to its balding gray head. Its eyes, with its slitted pupils, glared at the survivor as it pushed through the door quickly, rushing him. Stumbling back, he tried to raise the shotgun to fire, but he lost his footing and hit the ground hard, the shotgun thundering in the survivor's hands. The blast goes wild, shattering one of the windows at the station. The monster's almost on top of him, but it suddenly stops. The survivor isn't sure what's happening as the monster seems to just regard him for a moment, but it suddenly rears back, letting out a piercing bellow that seems to echo throughout the night. Fear having taken whatever instinct the survivor had, and he could do nothing but watch in horrified fascination. As the roar finally ends, the feral stands before him, taking in massive lungfuls of air. In mere moments, the roar is answered from across the night. The survivor turns his head to the diner across the street, watching as things begin to move from the darkness within. The windows suddenly shattering outward as a pack of ferals spill out onto the streets. Fear finally motivates him, and the survivor turns back to the massive feral. The big monster is moving towards him again, reaching out for him. Raising the shotgun, the survivor racks another round. He fires, but the weapon wasn't shouldered, and the blast nearly took it from his hands. The round goes wild again, hitting the alpha in the shoulder, forcing it to spin away as it roars in pain. The voice that emitted from its throat wasn't even human anymore. It hadn't been for some time, as the virus had done its work, changing it on a biological level. Scrambling to his feet, the survivor practically crouch runs into the driver's seat of the Bronco. The pack was screaming at him now. He raised the shotgun to his shoulder, firing 2 more blasts, which take down the front runners quickly. But the monsters were too close, maybe 30 feet away. He knew he couldn't get into the Bronco and get away in time. His mind races, knowing that he couldn't let the monsters tear apart his ride. He kept moving, racking another shell into the shotgun as he came back around the Bronco. The Alpha had recovered enough to pursue him, though. Its shoulder a bloody mess where the gray flesh and fabric had mixed together with the soaked blood. Raising his weapon again, the survivor fired again, this time hitting the Alpha in the chest, throwing him to the ground. A weak sound of pain, more animal than human, escapes the Alpha's lips, but the survivor couldn't pause for a moment. He kept running, racking the shotgun again, and he was crossing the street. His eyes darted around, looking for some bastion of safety in this dangerous world. His eyes fell on the drive-through coffee shop, with only a few of the windows that had allowed the workers to look into the world, and he knew that they probably had a storage room with only one entrance. He turned quickly, running towards the shop. His breath came out in ragged gasps, not being used to long sprints even before the end of the world had happened. He took the time to glance back, shocked at how close the pack had gotten to him. He put on an extra burst of speed, pushing through the stitch in his side as he finally reached the window of the coffee shop. He whirled at the last second, firing his final round into the approaching horde, not bothering to aim. He turned, leaping through the window, bashing his shoulder on the side as he pushed his way through. He could feel the feral hands grasping at his legs as he tumbled to the floor. Struggling back up quickly, he swings the shotgun at the grasping hands of the feral. One tries to push through the window, its gray, snarling face roaring at him with blackened teeth. Grasping the shotgun in both hands, he swings it again and again, making blood fly from the feral's shattered face as it falls away. He drops the shotgun useless without any ammo, and he turns back to the back room, slamming the door shut. He turns quickly to try and find something to prop up against it, knowing that the windows wouldn't hold the pack for long. He had angered them, taken down their alpha, and denied them a free meal. The storage room was more of a closet, but it had tough metal shelves that he throws in front of the door. There isn't enough room for them to fall, but they lean hard against the door and prop against the back wall. With a heavy sigh, he slides to the floor, where he begins to catch his breath. He can hear the monsters shattering the glass outside, dragging their way into the small building and beginning to beat on the door. His breathing begins to calm when he rubs at his head, with his hands shaking, with only his fists to defend him if the monsters get through the door. But it seems like it's going to hold, though the creatures continued their assault for what seemed like forever. There's a small window near the ceiling, and the survivor could see faint rays of light as the sun began to come up, as the day began to brighten. The monsters eventually gave up, seemingly heading off, searching for another source of food for the day. The day was when they hunted. The survivor knew that he couldn't leave now. There would be more of them out during the day than the ones that had chased him at night. More packs of them. They might even fight each other for a chance at his flesh, but he couldn't count on that to allow him to escape. He leaned his back against the wall, closing his eyes. This would be his bed for the day. When he awoke later, his back was stiff, his neck was cramped. Enough light came through the small window to allow him to look around at the mess he had made at his mad dash. A brief search of his cramped surroundings found some packaged cookies for him to eat in cans of espresso. He pushed aside some fallen napkins and was pleasantly surprised to find a small, beat-up radio. The device was battery-operated, and he set it up on one of the shelves and turned it on. He made sure the volume was low enough that it wouldn't attract any attention. He got mostly snow, until he found the Soul Survivors channel. The smooth tune of a ballad by Poison greeted his ears, and he smiled a little, knowing that he would at least have some company for the day. And when the song ended, the DJ came back on the air. "Hey there, rock fans, this is Soul Survivor, coming at you with the sounds to get you going," he had said, and the survivor frowned. The DJ didn't sound like his usual self. There was a long pause, and he could hear the ragged sobs coming from the other side of the radio waves. I don't think I can do this anymore," the DJ admitted. "I looked out the window this morning and I saw Beth. She was this cute waitress, used to serve me coffee every morning before my shift." The survivor could hear the tears in the DJ's voice. He knew that he was on edge. He sat straight up, his hands reaching for the radio, cradling it closer to his face. "Things aren't going to get better, man. This is the end, and we just have to come to terms with it," the DJ continues. "I'm sorry, but this is going to be my final broadcast. I hope my tips have helped somebody out there. Help them survive this mess, and if you hear me, good luck out there." There was another long pause before the DJ returned. Little something to go out on. With that, Metallica began to play over the radio, and the survivor stares at it for a moment. The song nearly reaching its conclusion, he snaps the radio off, not wanting to hear if the DJ actually will kill himself over the radio. Anger suddenly races through him, and he throws the radio against the wall. He had been so close. He had gotten stuck because of some feral pack. He looked at the door. He wondered if he could get to the Bronco and reload his shotgun before the monsters caught him. He wondered how many of them he could take down before they finally managed to bring him down and eat him. But he waited. He waited until the sun went down and the monsters found some place to sleep that night. It was after dark that he moved out of the coffee shop. The stock of the shotgun had cracked in his escape. But he made it back to the Bronco and reloaded it anyway. After getting back into the driver's seat, he sighed, flipping on the radio, his eyes widening as he looked at the dial. Hey, party people! You are once again tuning into Soul Survivor Radio, and we appreciate having you," the DJ began to say. Shock fills his body, and the survivor didn't hear the rest. It didn't make any sense. He pulled out of the parking lot, pointing the Bronco towards the radio station, and continued his journey. He finally reached the radio station a little after midnight. The reloaded shotgun came with him as he managed to push his way through the barricades. The good thing about the Farrells was that they weren't smart. They were very good at smashing through things and ignoring pain, but if you put a little effort into your defenses, odds are good that they would give up out of frustration before they got inside. The Soul Survivor show had continued throughout the night. The DJ had been playing the same music as before, so the survivor wasn't surprised by what he found. The DJ had been dead for several days, a bullet in his head. He must have shot himself while he was in the chair, but had fallen after his death. His revolver tumbled across the room as he came to rest in a growing pool of his own blood, which was now dried around his head. He had thought about opening a window, though, some sort of last-minute courtesy to whoever might find his body. The station was on a loop, using the last several days of recording as a never-ending show. The survivor knew nothing about the equipment, having done nothing technical in his life before. He looks down at the radio board, noticing a flashing light on one of the buttons. With a heavy sigh, he puts down his shotgun and drags a nearby chair over. He does his best not to disturb the DJ's body. He's not sure if the flashing button will make the radio station go live again. Wouldn't even know what to say or how to turn on music if he did, but what else did he have to do? Where else could he go? He pauses a little bit longer before picking up the DJ's discarded headphones and putting them on. It's another ballad, this one by Journey. He closes his eyes and lets the music wash over him. As it finally begins to fade out, he reaches out and presses the button. His eyes pop open as he hears a voice on the other end of the line. He stammers for a moment, his mind racing at what he hears, and he finally finds the words to respond. "Hello, caller. You're on the air with the Soul Survivor." This story was written by Andrew Potter and narrated by Benny Potter. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please consider liking and subscribing for more content.